glad you came despite the snow. I am going to introduce Hilltown Land Trust, this building, and then our speakers. And then we will be spending, I don't know, we didn't give a specific time for how long you want it to take.
A little less than half an hour, maybe
little
like
less
20
than
minutes.
20 minutes here, and then we'll be putting our snowshoes on and going outside until noon. So, so Hilltown Land Trust is a nonprofit that was founded in 1986, and it was all volunteer for almost 20 years. It serves 13 rural towns west of the Connecticut River, predominantly in western Hampshire County. By 2009, HLT was big enough that it really couldn't handle being an all-volunteer organization, so it affiliated with the trustees and took on a executive director, who is Sally Loomis, who's not here today, but she works 3/4 time, and then there's myself, who's an AmeriCorps member serving here for 11 months, that is here full-time, and then we have a half-time outreach person, and together, the three of us take care of 4,000 acres on some 40 properties in our service area. And we do public education engagement events such as this one, which are really important to us. If you are a member, thank you. Or if you joined today, thank you. And this is a trustee's property. It's called the Bullitt Reservation. There's a really neat interpretive panel out there that talks about who William Bullitt was. And one thing I love about this property is there's a trail that goes from here all the way to the DAR through Chapel Brook. And Chapel Brook is also a trustee's property, so it's a really neat space if you ever feel like coming back. And first we're going to have Laura Marks share the results of the tracking study and talk about Berkshire wildlife linkages. And Laura is a forest ecologist for the Nature Conservancy of Massachusetts chapter. She works on land conservation, forest science, and currently much of her time is spent on the wildlife linkage, which she'll be talking about today. Before I let you start, I just want to give a few notes about tracking. I have my other piece of we're gonna stop close. Oh yeah, okay. I just want to set a set of expectations, which is, and Laura will say this again, but that after a fresh snowfall, it takes a little bit of time for animals to get out there. But Laura has we're gonna see some tracks, not a ton, and Jess, who is right here, has a ton of other stuff to talk about without us necessarily having to be staring at tracks. So thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming today. I know you did not come here to stare at a screen, so I just wanted to talk a little bit to put what we're going to do today into context and provide you guys some information about the Berkshire wildlife linkage, which is a wildlife corridor that we are standing in right now. So we all know this because we live here, but Western Massachusetts is a really globally important place. This is a map showing biomass stuff in the forest, and if you look at where Massachusetts is, you can see that dark green color. We have really intact, healthy, dense forests in central and western Massachusetts. And it's not just that those forests are important for carbon storage and wildlife habitat, and sort of for being that core habitat, they're also really important for animal movement. So this is a model that is showing where different types of animals are projected to have to move to adapt to climate change. So they're going to move northwards. They're already, in fact, moving upslope and northwards, and also along river corridors. Sometimes those can be a little bit cooler places than some of the slopes that they're on. And again, if you look at where we are, there's just this stream of movement going from the central Appalachians and southern Appalachians up into the northern Appalachians through western Massachusetts. Now this, of course, will only happen if we continue to do the hard work of conserving wildlife habitats and making sure that wildlife are still able to move between them. And the nice thing about doing that work is that a landscape that works to move and support wildlife is also one that supports us, because a healthy landscape is also going to continue to sequester carbon and filter our drinking water and support the forest products and recreation industries. So there's a lot of reasons to keep this corridor intact. So this is a map that I'm not going to dwell on, but just to show you this outline, it keeps reminding me of SpongeBob. Once I've seen it, I just can't unsee it. But this is an area that we drew around places that have a lot of intact habitat and also habitat that's really important for wildlife movement. It covers most of Western Mass and parts of Connecticut, New York, and Vermont. And in this linkage, we have this great set of habitat, but we also have a challenge. Massachusetts has 36,000 miles of road in the state. And obviously this is not all the roads, right? If I made this map with all of the roads, it would just be purple. In fact, it would be so purple that I tried to do that just to sort of show what it would look like. And the online viewer for these data won't let you turn them on at that scale because you can't see anything. So there are roads everywhere. So we have really good habitat, critical for wildlife movement, but a lot of potential barriers here. And what that leads to is a situation you see all through the hill towns and all throughout the wildlife linkage, where you have wildlife like that mink track down in the lower right-hand corner moving along the river in close proximity to a road. This is actually Route 112 in Worthington where you see the track. So in order to address that, how do we keep habitat healthy for wildlife and for people? How do we make sure that wildlife are able to get to suitable habitat as they need to adapt their ranges? A wide group of partners formed that Berkshire Wildlife Linkage. And it's both a geography, that place, and a partnership of people working together. And we have three main strategies in the linkage. The first is to protect gaps is to conserve protected land. So we want to fill in those gaps in the existing network of protected land, both protect the rest of the cores and the corridors between them. And to do that, we have a powerhouse of land trusts working here, including Hilltown Land Trust. We also have smaller land trusts like Sheffield Land Trust, which is a town-based land trust. And then we have bigger ones, Franklin Land Trust, Kestrel, Mass Audubon, TNC, and New England Forestry Foundation. So protecting that land is probably the most important part of our strategy in the wildlife corridor. But another strategy is to make sure that once the land that needs to be protected that wildlife can always move to get to where they need to go. And that involves improving the transportation network to get both wildlife and water under roads. That's one of the reasons you see Mass DOT listed as a partner here in this linkage. What that can look like is a couple things. At the top, you see a culvert that was turned into a bridge. I believe this is Bronson Brook, but I don't remember which example I put up on here, but this is in the hill towns. And when we change a culvert like this to a bridge like that, it has a lot of advantages. One is this culvert is much more likely in a major storm to get clogged up and wash out the road. That bridge is going to be able to pass even something like the stormwaters of Irene. This one is not easy to get through if you're a fish. You have to kind of jump up onto this not very inviting concrete surface, slide your way across in almost no water, and keep going. Whereas on the right, you simply just keep moving up the stream. This is cheaper in the long run. It's not cheaper in the short term, but what happens with structures like these is that towns have to replace them again and again and again. And in the long run, it is cheaper to build the infrastructure right once and have it last for 50 or 60 or 70 years. There are some culverts that have been replaced 3 times in the past 10 years, so that quickly adds up as a cost. And finally, if you're thinking about an animal moving along here, if they're walking along the bank when they get to this culvert, they have to stop and go up and over the road. That runs the risk that they get hit by a car, and as many of us know, hopefully, knock on wood, from near misses, but sometimes not, if your car hits a coyote or a deer or a moose, it's not only bad for the animal, it's bad for you and your car. Whereas with this structure, the wildlife can keep moving along the bank under the road. And this isn't the only thing that can be done. This is in Vermont. If you look on the far bank, you'll see that there's actually a little wildlife path where wildlife can move through, kind of the same idea, so that they can get under that bridge. That one's kind of cool because it just involves fill that would have had to be hauled away from the project. Instead, they pack it down, and basically it's a zero cost option for wildlife. So we want to protect the rest of the land that needs to be protected. We want to make sure that wildlife can get to that protected land. And our third strategy is to help people find their place. Again, both geographically, as a landowner, what role does your land play in moving wildlife? And in the partnership, if you're working for Berkshire Environmental Action Team or Westfield State University, sort of what are the things that you're doing in your job that can contribute to this wildlife corridor effort? So, that is a great set of strategies, but remember the Berkshire Wildlife Linkage covers all of Western Massachusetts. So there's a real question here. We cannot do this everywhere. And so we were found ourselves faced with the question, if I have only $1 and 1 hour to put towards land protection or road improvements, where should I spend that where I'll get the biggest return on investment for wildlife? And that is where tracking comes in. This is off the screen at the top, but at the top it says we got our answer in part, and then the next slide is going to say through tracking. And I'm looking at Jess here because Jess Applin was one of the people who worked on our wildlife tracking study. She was actually our lead on that. She also worked with Aaliyah Del Molino from Berkshire Environmental Action Team, Nancy Rich and Meredith Babcock from the Westfield Wild and Scenic Advisory Committee, and a ton of certified wildlife trackers who were volunteers who helped with this effort. So this is just showing you that this is skipping ahead to the answer. When we looked in the wildlife corridor at the places where land protection or transportation improvements would have the biggest benefit to the habitat network as a whole, we found these places. The ovals are places where land protection has a really disproportionately positive impact on the rest of the corridor, and the lines are road segments where getting wildlife under those roads, again, has a huge positive impact in how wildlife are able to move through the whole network. But there's stuff behind that, right? So we didn't just draw lines on the map. We had a model that I'm not going to get into the details of, but it comes from UMass, Mass DOT, and TNC. It's called Critical Linkage. It's a really, really, really good model, but we needed to do some on-the-ground work to ground truth it, to make sure that this model, which says the places that are really high priorities are dark blue, they're more connected land, and the light blue areas are sort of less connected, what does that actually mean on the ground? How many coyotes are going through there? Those road segments that are red, are they actually stopping wildlife? Or are they just places that the model thinks is a barrier to wildlife? And so we worked on some tracking work to try to answer that question. And I put this up here just in case for those of you who want to just geek out about this map. This is actually up as an interactive map. You can zoom in and look at where your house is on here. You can read up about the data if you're interested. You can find out more about it. It's at bit.do/linkage map. So I am going to zoom into this area here in Worthington, Chester, Huntington, not coincidentally places that Hilltown Land Trust does great work, and show you just a little bit of what we did. We used tracking both to sort of calibrate this model to make sure that the places that it said were important matched with what we saw on the ground, but also because we wanted to zoom down to the parcel and road segment level. Within one of those places that's a priority, what's happening? And so Jess and others laid out transects along Route 112 and the middle branch of the Westfield River and the Kinney Brook Ridge in the winter of 2013 and 2014. And they went out there with wildlife cameras, wildlife tracking, and a roadkill study to try to get at where animals were moving and where they were blocked. Again, you're not here to look at maps. I'm just going to do a really quick snapshot of the results. As I was telling Jess on the way in, I am not doing this work justice. This was Jess's master's thesis. There's a lot behind this work, but the idea here is just to kind of get us set up for tracking today. So this is a map Aaliyah made for me. He called it the cool species map because he turned off deer. Because, you know, there's lots of them. So this is just showing we found over 1,000 tracks in this tracking study. And you can see animals along Route 112, along the river, along the Kinnybrook Ridge. We saw porcupines, we saw otters, we saw fishers, we saw bobcat, we saw bear. It was really an amazing study. And one of many things that it showed us was we were doing some wildlife tracking that was in areas the model said were pretty good habitat, pretty connected, and we had some transects in areas outside of that, a little bit more fragmented, those sort of lighter blue areas. And we found that inside the corridor, you had more abundance of species like bobcat and fisher, things that we think of a little bit more shy and maybe interior forest animals. And outside the corridor, this is one reason why we turned off deer. Deer were everywhere. And you also saw coyote, right? Another species that we associate with being able to live in close proximity to people's houses or roads or things like that. So again, there was a lot of stuff that went into this study, but that's just one of the things we found is sort of that difference. Yeah?
Where did fox fall in that whole binary thing? Were they in Shire or less Shire?
That's a really good question that I do not remember the answer
It took
to.
a very long time, but
It was-
from what I remember, you had a higher activity level on the outside or on the edges.
Thank you.
Yeah, and at the end too, I'm also gonna give you guys a link for all of this was, written up with some nice maps and everything, so if you wanna dig into what Jess did, lots of different graphs and actual maps of the tracks that we found and where things were crossing and abundance of different species. This was our roadkill study, and I put this up mostly to make you guys aware that there's a big citizen science project. It's at linkinglandscapes.info. The Mass Department of Fisheries and Wildlife is collecting roadkill data, and that feeds directly into what Mass DOT does. So if you are driving around and you see, especially a species that's a little bit more rare, like a bobcat, lying along the side of the road, you can actually go here. There's a little Google Maps interface. You can zoom into where you were. If you have a GPS point, that's fine too, but even if you don't, if you make note of where you saw it, and you can actually enter, I saw this species on this day at this location. And this is just showing Route 112, largely to show that Route 112 was a big problem if you were a snake or a frog. Not as much a problem if you were a mammal. We were pleasantly surprised at how little roadkill we saw along this section of 112. Indicating that it's a barrier, but it's not a hard barrier. It's not like nothing is able to get across that road. And I'm just gonna end with a story of how tracking turns into action. This is a mink track that Jess will remember. This was a really, really interesting finding it was one of the days that I got to go out with the trackers. I was lucky a couple times in the winter to go out. And we found this mink track along Route 112 and saw it crossing the road. You went across to the other side and found the same, size and age of track going in the same direction. But we wanted to know where it come from, so we actually backtracked. We followed that mink away from the road. We got all the way up this little ridge, and we saw a mink doing like everything that you could hope to see in tracks. There were holes when it had dived in to try to get prey. There were these slides where it was going around. And the place that it was doing all that was actually unprotected land. Then it came down, crossed Route 112, and went into a protected wildlife management area. And this is just showing that little triangle down at the bottom is where we saw the first track, and then up at the top is those slides that I was showing you. And I'm gonna move off of that map very quickly because that landowner, I sent them some information about the mink that was on their land. Thank them for letting us do this study. They are now working to conserve their land with Hilltown Land Trust. So here's a thing where it was tracking, it was citizen science data, and it turned directly into someone wanting to take that step to conserve their land, which is really exciting to me. So again, you guys are here to go out in the woods. We're gonna do that, we're gonna track, but I wanted you to realize that you're in a really, really regionally important area. And that things that you might think of as just something you do on a Saturday, collecting tracking data, something you might do when you see roadkill, putting that information in, all of that leads to real and lasting conservation action. And most importantly, tracking is a way, of course, to hear stories in the woods and to see animals you may never see. This, by the way, is that link I mentioned that will have all the wildlife tracking data. It's nature.org/explorema. So I am just gonna end with a little video of an otter and a quote from Nancy Rich, who was one of our trackers. So she writes, while otters are related to the loping fisher and bounding weasel, they move in a completely different way, pulling themselves along by the front feet as the back feet draw together by the tail, and the heavy plump body heaves and rolls until it reaches a gliding point. The fisher, however, darts, turning a quick and powerful body this way and that while inspecting the camera. I want to see the land where I live, hear it, feel it, smell it, be touched by the cold, follow my animal neighbors' doings. I want more than guidebook identifications. I want to hear the stories in the woods. And I am hearing more stories. Really, it's these opportunities to be outside, watching, listening, following, that allow me to listen better. By paying attention and being there, and considering animals as he and she and not it, my hearing begins to come back. And again, that quote is from Nancy Rich, who actually wrote an essay about her tracking experience and won an award for it. So I just wanted to use this just to get us excited about what we're gonna see today. We have two great trackers, we have snow, we have a beautiful day. Hopefully this kind of gave you a little context and excitement, and I would say we should go outside and start seeing what we see. Thank you.
Thank you.